All right, so there's another word that goes with if, and it's called else. So if we use the word else, now what happens is we've created a link between these two things. So the word else can only be used in Java in connection with an if. All right? So what I've written right now is fine. But just watch what happens. If I were to just get rid of that if statement and try to compile again, watch what happens. So if I just control X, compile, it says else without if. You can't use the word else unless it's linked to an if statement. Okay? And it has to be like immediately following it. If I put in another line of code right here, like if I tried to make another variable all of a sudden for some reason, I would get that same compile error message, else without if, because I interrupted the if else link. So it has to be directly linked to the if. Okay? You can't put anything in the middle of it, except for whatever your if condition is. So in this case, the brace structure is my if condition. Whatever comes immediately after that would have to be an else if I wanted an else statement linked to it. I couldn't put anything in between. Okay? Now, when you write an if-else structure, you're giving the computer a choice. It can do one or the other. It can't do both. Okay? So an if-else structure creates a system where I'm either going to print, you got an A plus, good job, or I'm going to print goodbye, but I'm never going to print both, and I'm actually never going to print neither. Okay? That's not an option either. I've got to do one or the other. I have to. All right? So basically, like right now with 97 in there, it's going to print the first two. So let's see that happen. Okay? And I got both of those to print. If I went back and changed this to an 87 again, now I'm going to have a goodbye print. So it's going to do one or the other. I can't make it print all three in this setting. So no matter what X value I choose, there's no way to make it print all three. And no matter what X value I choose, there's no way to make it print neither. Okay, it's going to do one or the other every single time. That's how an if-else structure works. You're not allowed to give an else statement a condition. So like if you came here and said else, let's say X is greater than or equal to 90, and then you tried to put something here like you got an A, that can't happen. Watch the compile error I get. Okay, it says not a statement. The reason it's saying not a statement is an else does not have a parameter. It's a little different than like other types of methods that we've used. So it's not expecting a Boolean condition. An else statement, like the word implies, is just saying do this if the if fails. You can't put another condition on it. Now, there is a way to put a condition on it. And what it is I'll open a brand new if. So this is called an if-else if. So now I'm saying if this statement here fails, X is not greater than or equal to 95, okay, you can run an additional check to see if X is greater than 90. But you're only allowed to do that if the first if statement fails. Okay, so let me show you what I mean. If I put this back up to 97 right now, and I run it, okay, I get, you got an A plus, good job, because the first if was true. Now, think about this. Is 97 greater than 90 or equal to? Yeah, it is. But that piece of code didn't run because even though that if statement was true, it was linked to this if statement through the else. And remember how an if-else structure works. It's one or the other. So when that first if kicked in as true and printed, that completely voided the else that was attached to it. And so any code attached to that else automatically got skipped. Okay? Now, where that if could come in is if I put in a value here like, say, 93. Okay? If I put in X is 93 and I run my program right now, all right, now I got an A. Okay? It didn't say anything about an A plus or good job, but it printed that I got an A. All right, if I change this back to, say, 87, and I ran it again, it's going to actually print nothing. So like we saw earlier, nothing will print. I'm just going to get a blank, okay? Nothing happens, all right? So both of my if statements failed. There was nothing for the computer to do at that point, okay? And I could link as many of these if I wanted, So like I could do this again. I could put in another else right here. And maybe on this one, I'll say, 85, and I'll set this one up as an A minus. Okay, now that would kick in with an 87. And a lot of times what we'll do is, like, at the very end of all this, we'll just put an ultimate else. And maybe in our ultimate else, it will say something like, like nice try, but you didn't get an A. Okay? And so in this case, let's see what happens here. If I run this now with an 87, okay, what do we think is going to print on the screen? If we run this with an 87, let's see. Okay, it says you got an A minus. And so what happened was the first if statement failed. Now, if the first if statement is true, remember, you do not read anything from the else attached to it. But it wasn't true. So now we read this. If that statement's true, I would do its code and skip any else attached to it. But it was false. So I checked this if statement. This if statement was true. So now I printed you got an A minus. At that point, once that if became true, the else that was linked to it got skipped. So notice that we didn't print nice try, but you didn't get an A. If I wanted that thing there to print, what's a value I could put in for x? Well, how about if I put in like 100? Would that work? No. If I put in 100, the if statement up here would be true. I would print you got an A plus, good job, and then everything after it would be skipped because it's all linked through that else. It's all linked through here, so everything following it would be skipped. The only way I could get that bottom line of text to print is if I put in a number less than 85. So 84 or less, if I ran here, would come all the way down to that final else, which can sort of be thought of as like a default. Like that's going to kick in no matter what. So even if everything else fails, it's kind of like saying if all else fails, this is what you're going to do. Okay? So if everything above it fails and is false, then we'll kick in on that final one.